I really think we need federal legislation that defines a path forward for all regenerative medicine, whether it's autologous, whether it's allogeneic, and kind of really gives us a path forward for regulators to regulate and for clinicians to deliver and for manufacturers to start producing. I think that's the only way that we can quickly provide this to the masses at an affordable price and really change healthcare. My name is Dr. Tejas Ozarkar, and I am an interventional pain physician that focuses on regenerative medicine and stem cell therapies, especially for orthopedic conditions, including the entire spine. So when a patient is considering regenerative medicine to avoid surgery, we really need to take a close look at their advanced imaging, because sometimes certain problems take surgery. Sometimes you need to bring in the big guns to fix a health problem. But many times, if not most times, we can consider regenerative medicine options to help avoid surgery, or at least kick that can down the road. So stem cells in the spine work in a couple of different ways. Most importantly, they can help mitigate the inflammatory response. Some of the cells that live inside the discs, if there's a large tear inside the disc, or some of the cells that live inside of the cartilage or inside of the joints in the spine or inside the muscles of the spine, they go haywire because they've been hurting for a very long time, and they're spewing these inflammatory chemicals sometimes with no notice. Sometimes people, are pulling weeds in their front yard or doing something very physical and it sets it off, but sometimes they don't do anything. And these cells, because they're programmed to be this way, because it's been hurting the same way for the past 10 years, just go haywire for practically no reason. And so there's this huge inflammatory response. And what stem cells can do, particularly mesenchymal stem cells, or there's kind of a paradigm shift in the naming. Some people call them mesenchymal signaling cells, but these particular cells are orchestrator cells. So when we inject them around cells that are going completely haywire, these MSCs are able to orchestrate these cells. They are able to read the microenvironment and say, there's a lot of inflammation here, but there is no infection. There's nothing bad happening. There's no real reason for all this inflammation. So they can read the microenvironment and on a cellular level, tone down the amount of inflammation that these cells are spewing out for sometimes no reason at all. And so that's the first and foremost way that it works. Secondly, what we do is we leverage a lot of different therapies together. So we may use stem cells, we may use products like hyaluronidase or hyaluronic acid or fibrin or other injectates that are commonly used to treat certain conditions. We may leverage all of these things together because we can, with some of these injectates, we can break up the scar tissue in the epidural space. With some of these injectates, we can seal a crack in the disc. And when you have the cells controlling the inflammation and orchestrating the cells that live in that space and tone down the overall volume, and then you seal it up or you break up scar tissue with some of the other stuff, when we leverage things together, that's when we get kind of a 1 + 1 = 4 effect. And that's what we're typically trying to look for and look at. We want to do what it takes to win. And so sometimes that's using a couple things together. Sometimes that might be breaking the procedure apart into a couple of different events. Sometimes that is doing some dry needling or prolotherapy or PRP beforehand and priming the tissue and preparing the tissue and then hitting it with stem cells. So there are a lot of ways. And so one thing that I really enjoy about my job is that I can tailor what I think is the best option for the patient. And sometimes I am talking it through with the patient and we have a shared decision. I say, these are the 2 or 3 best options that I think that you should consider. These are the positives and negatives, and we all make a shared decision. Sometimes it's even with the family, whereas once again with conventional medicine, we have to see what the insurance algorithm is, and we have to say, I know these first 3 injections or these first 3 interventions are not going to work, but we have to do them so you can blow 6 months and a lot of your money and time and effort, and then we can get to the thing that I think might actually help, which is outrageous to me, but that's the system that most doctors have to provide care in, but really we have an opportunity to just tailor whatever we think is going to provide you the best possible outcome and talk it through with our patients and come up with a game plan and be there for them, in the long term until we kind of take it home for them. The biggest question that I ask patients and ask other doctors if they're referring me a patient is how much of this problem is structural and how much of it is inflammatory and biomechanical. Because through our process at RMI, through our process at the Stem Cell Institute, the inflammatory component of a disease process and the biomechanical component of the disease process, these are things that we can help you with. If it's a purely structural issue, for example, if a disc herniates so badly in your neck that it crushes your spinal cord and you're having a tough time walking and going to the restroom and moving your hands, stem cells are absolutely not the right answer. Full thickness tears inside of shoulders, or full thickness tears inside other joints like the knee. Those are things that we're pretty guarded with. We don't want patients to have to undergo surgery, but at the same time, we're gonna shoot straight with you. But most conditions are actually more inflammatory than they are anything else. Typically, if you can take an anti-inflammatory and if it can take the edge off, or if it can completely resolve your pain, even just for an hour or 2 or a short period of time, that generally indicates that there's a good component of inflammatory pain associated with your problem. And if that's the case, that's where stem cells can make a big difference and give you much longer lasting relief than a steroid injection or repeated steroid injections or whatever else conventional medicine may have to offer. So our ideal patient, we focus on the spine. We do all peripheral joints as well. I've injected thumbs and toes, and we inject lots of knees and shoulders, but our core competency is spine, and that is simply because getting a knee injection, it's usually pretty straightforward. When we do it, we hit a lot of different spots. We don't do it the usual way. We go inside the joint. We may inject inside your meniscus. We may inject, across some tendons as well. But if you're just getting a simple knee injection, a lot of people can do that. You don't necessarily need subspecialty training, 5 years of training and how to do these types of injections. When it comes to the neck, when it comes to the mid back, when it comes to the low back, you have to be very judicious in allowing in deciding who is going to stick a needle in these areas, because it's very easy to hit something that is very delicate and important and that controls a lot more things than you thought it could. And so we really focus on spine because there are not very many physicians who do regenerative medicine in the spine and do a lot of it and do it well. And so our ideal patient, especially when it comes to spine, is someone who has mostly neck pain, mid-back pain, or low back pain, or buttock pain. If you have lots of searing pain down your arm and your neck is annoying but not that big of a deal, and the searing pain down your arm is what's getting you, we've had success stories like that, but it drastically reduces the rate of success when you have more of a nerve problem and once again, that's typically going to be more of a structural issue and less an inflammatory issue. And there's a lot of nuance in this field as well. So we invite you to apply and talk to us and consider things. But our where we really hit home runs and where we do way better than conventional medicine is axial neck pain, mid back pain, and low back pain. So base of skull in between the shoulder blades, all across the neck, all across the back. That's typically, and then buttock pain, piriformis pain. That's typically where we can hit some home runs and provide people, one or two interventions and really change the course of their disease. And I really think that is that segment of patient, which is most of the patients with neck and back pain. I think that segment of patient, that's what we're really targeting, and that's the part of medicine that we're really trying to change first, because those people's options are incredibly limited after they failed physical therapy and chiropractic. They start with the steroid injections, and it just does it. For 1 out of every 5 patients, it works out pretty well, but most patients still need to take a bunch of medications, still need to do a bunch of chiropractic, and still need to do all these injections, and it becomes a part of their identity, which is terrible, because we want to liberate people from that so they can just move on and do whatever they need to do. So in particular with spinal cord injury and spine injuries, and frankly any injuries, the earlier you do regenerative medicine, the more robust the treatment is going to be. For people who have been living with this pain or living with this problem for 30 years, they probably need multiple applications, and it's harder to overcome all of the damage that condition has done to a person's body. So early treatment, preferably within months. It never hurts to just reach out to Reardon Medical Institute or Stem Cell Institute and just see where we are with things as soon as you learn about a condition. And then we may guide you through that process and say, look, there's a lot of really good conventional medicine stuff for your condition, or let's address this early with what we have to offer. And so I think that as soon as you know what your condition is, as soon as you have a diagnosis, consider reaching out to the Stem Cell Institute or Reardon Medical Institute, and we can help guide you as to what the next best steps are. In the United States, we're incredibly limited as to what we can do. If we are taking stem cells from your own body, which is the term that we use is autologous. So if we're taking bone marrow stem cells or stem cells from your fat, then the FDA provides us as clinicians an exemption, a same day, same procedure exemption, where with whatever we take out of your body, we have to put it back into your body the same day. And so, and we have to minimally process it, and what the FDA considers, what the FDA calls minimally manipulation of tissue. In addition to that, we partner with Dr. Reardon's lab here in Dallas, Texas, and we do offer some expanded services for allogeneic products. So we can, in certain clinical trials, offer umbilical cord tissue and some other perinatal tissue, but even though Dr. Reardon's lab has scientists that are trained to find the best possible tissue and the best possible source of these injectates, what we cannot do is we can't on a cellular level break all the components down and just pick out what we want. So what we do in the United States is we take all of the things that we know work independently and we use them and we layer them so that we can get an effect that's kind of similar to what they do in Panama. In Panama, what they're able to do is they're able to take an umbilical cord, which is donated after a healthy C-section delivery, so it means that mother and baby are happy doing their own thing. This is medical trash, but this umbilical cord is chock full of these MSCs, mesenchymal stem cells or mesenchymal signaling cells, and they're able to pluck out the ones that are the hardiest cells and the ones that they know that are going to be able to provide the most amount of change and benefit to their patient. And so they're able to pluck them out and they're able to culture and expand them, which means that they put them in media and they let them grow and grow and grow, and they're always surveilling every single step of that growth process to make sure that there aren't any mutations that we don't want or anything like that. And they sift through just the best cells, and they have 40,000 treatments under their belt, so they have a good idea of which types of cells tend to help with which types of conditions. And so basically they're able to pluck out the best cells, sift through all of that, and only give you the best cells. So for insurance to be able to cover this, I think a few things need to happen. First, we need to be able to guarantee a certain amount of quality. The PRP that you get at our clinic is not the PRP that you're going to get at your local doctor's office who buys a kit with a little gel block on the bottom of it. And so I think that is, whereas when you get a steroid injection, the steroid that the clinic, in the middle of nowhere is buying and the steroid that the clinic in New York City is buying is the same. And so I think dosing and understanding what exactly is going through that needle and what injectate is being used, I think we need to clear all that up and we need to have some standards on that. The second thing that I think is really important for insurance carriers to consider when hopefully they can start approving this product is making sure that they are very judicious about whose hands are delivering this product. And so if you miss the mark because you're not well trained enough to get the needle exactly where you're supposed to get it, then the outcomes are not going to be good. So I think insurance carriers would be wise to approve this product, to start covering this product, regenerative medicine, and making sure that only the best qualified physicians who are specialty trained are going to be delivering it. And I think the third and final thing is that they should be judicious about which type of patient is going to be offered this therapy, because there are certain types of patients that we know are going to do incredibly well with this based on their health profile, based on their condition. I think that if insurance is going to cover this, they need to be really smart about letting the providers know who is the best candidate, or going to centers where we've done all the legwork and we already know which patients are probably going to do pretty well, or which patients have an okay chance, or which patients don't have a chance at all. If insurance take that into consideration, they would be able to save an immense amount of money. Not that is on the top of their mind, but I think that they could really change healthcare, and I think we could really shore up our entire insurance and healthcare sector if insurance companies considered including this therapy. So the first thing that I would ask regulators to consider is to consider data that we have collected outside of the United States. As long as we use the same stringent standards that they would use in a clinical trial here in the United States. But currently, all of the work that was done in Panama is essentially, that's not really, from my understanding, something that regulators in the United States are interested at looking at, even though there are 40,000 treatments that have been delivered, even though most of those people are Americans who take their hard-earned American dollars and take them to another country and give it to them and come right back to the United States. So that's the first thing that I would ask regulators, is to consider at least the Americans that have been treated outside of the country, at least look at their data, as long as it was collected appropriately. The second thing that I would ask them to consider is to, just like when regulators were able to look at something like the COVID vaccine and accelerate any of the therapies, any of the emerging therapies that really, had not been tested prior to, opening it up. I think that if they look at that model and they consider, applying that model to other things that could provide us benefit for decades and generations to come, like stem cells and like regenerative therapies. I think that's another thing that I would ask them to consider. And the third thing that I would ask them to consider is to really consider hitting the brakes on the 510K approval process. And that is an approval process where a company can piggyback their product and say, my product is very similar to the product that was approved 3 years ago. You don't even have to look into it. And the FDA currently has a mechanism for which it is almost effortless to go through that 510K approval process. And I see this in pain management all the time, not necessarily with regenerative therapies, but I see it in implanted devices all of the time. Devices that have nothing to do with the predecessor product that don't work in the same way, don't even look the same. And even when they're marketing to physicians, they say this is a totally different product. But when they go to the FDA, they're allowed to get it cleared through this 510K clearance process. And I think that creates a lot of noise in the biotech space and also in the healthcare space. And I think that ultimately, I think that it makes investors who are not really aware of all of the nuances associated with this particular segment of the economy. I think that it dilutes out their money, and I think that they're much more willing to invest in a product, even though they know that it's not a revolutionary product, a product that is going to be able to get that 10K approval, 510K approval, and be able to be sold in the United States in the next 2 or 3 years, as opposed to a product that has so much promise, but will certainly take more time than that, and there's more of a hurdle to get over to get it approved. I think that it dilutes out, it creates a lot of noise, and it dilutes out a lot of the investor interest and money, which is what we really require to really push it to the next step and bring this therapy here to the United States. I think the things that I'm most excited about in regenerative medicine is being able to really shift the paradigm with spine care, because neck pain and back pain is such a huge drag on the American economy. There are real costs, there are hidden costs. People have to take off work, or they have to, end a career that they really loved. And so I think that if we can use those culture expanded cells that they offer in Panama for spinal conditions, I think that it will be a total game changer. I think it will help a lot of people avoid surgery that typically doesn't work as well as most people want it to anyways, in terms of spine surgery. And I think that it would drastically lower costs and have much less recovery and much less risk associated with it. So that's the number one thing that I'm most excited about. The second thing that I'm most excited about is cardiac care. There is a huge underserved and unserved population for people who have lots of heart disease. And I think that, and that's it's the number one killer of men and women. It is one of the largest costs associated with healthcare. And I think that the cost savings and the benefit to the patient that stem cells can deliver for cardiac patients is immense. And I think that it will extend lives and improve quality of lives in patients that at this point in time are kind of don't really have any options. The third thing that I'm really excited about, and this is just kind of overall, is I'm as a physician who at one point, did a lot of work with Medicare and saw a lot of Medicare patients. I'm incredibly concerned that I will not have Medicare when I'm Medicare age, and that most people in my age group, most millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Zers, will not have any type of safety net in terms of healthcare. And I think that stem cells, if we can get it fully commercialized in the United States, if we can bring the cost down, if we can help a lot of people avoid surgery, I think that I see an opportunity to shore up our entire healthcare system, because the applications are limitless. I mean, we are just scratching the surface with what we're doing in orthopedics here at RMI and what they're doing with various conditions at Stem Cell Institute. We're just using a few different types of stem cells. And so I think that if we have legislations that kind of opens up the research that we can do, I think that we'll be using all different types of stem cells from all different sources across our body, and I think we'll be able to treat all types of conditions for way cheaper than what we're currently doing. And I think that it will give us an opportunity for Gen Xers and younger to have some sort of healthcare in the future. And we don't have any solutions. No one even is thinking about any solutions. Everybody's just going on business as usual, and one day there will be a day of reckoning, and I don't want there to be a lot of losers. I think that most people deserve access to good care. And so what it will take for us to get to the level at which Panama and MediStem Panama and the Stem Cell Institute in Panama is able to deliver in terms of their cell therapy, in terms of the quality, in terms of having a gauge of what type of outcome a certain patient with a certain condition will have. To bring that to the United States, we need a couple of things. So first, we need to be able to work collaboratively with the FDA, and we need to be able to identify the types of patients that will do that we know tend to do pretty well with this type of therapy, and perform clinical trials on those patients. One of the major limiting factors is that it is outrageously expensive to run a clinical trial in the United States. And many times you need to collaborate with a university, or many times you have to collaborate with a large research institution, which has its own set of costs. And so unless you have a lot of money from whatever source, investor money or big corporation money, it's really difficult to run one of these clinical trials and get a cell-based product approved. The problem that we see is that we know in the hands of big pharmaceutical industry, the giants in big pharma, when they have an opportunity to fix a problem, fix a disorder, when they have an opportunity to drastically improve someone's life, typically that drug or product or device is prohibitively expensive. And I understand that regenerative medicine is prohibitive to some, but not all, with the way that it's currently being done. But when you look at certain medications that have been introduced to the market in the past several years, certain weight loss medications that seem to reduce the risk of heart attack, that seem to provide a very robust treatment to diabetes, that can help people, reduce the amount of weight that's on their body. When we look at that, we look at the big pharma's production costs, and then we look at the actual cost of what an insurance company has to pay, or what a cash option is for a patient. It is totally out of reach for most people, even though they introduce an amazing product that can help. It's cost prohibitive and will, in certain cases can really take down insurance companies, can really destroy someone's personal finances. And alternatively, we see a lot of medications that maybe don't really even work that well, and maybe have some sort of outcome that is important to the FDA that they may have improved, but not really important to a patient. We see that in the wrong hands, when you have an amazing therapy, it's very easy to taint what will happen, and it will actually make it less accessible to the general public over the course of many years until that patent expires, which there's, that's a whole different issue, because unfortunately pharma has an opportunity in the United States to extend their patents, to extend the protection. They don't have to go into new R&D other than paying a few doctors to run a clinical trial, which is easy when you're making billions and billions of dollars, and you add an indication and you make it so that certain drugs that could really be pivotal for certain patients are still going to be out of reach for the course of their life, and maybe the course of the next couple of generations. And so unfortunately, we're kind of at a standstill here in the United States. We really need to have homegrown corporations and biotech firms like Signature Biologics, like what Dr. Reardon is trying to do, that have patients on the top of their mind, that don't necessarily have billions and billions of dollars to run all these clinical trials, but also we know that a lot of these biotech firms that truly have patients at the top of their list in terms of what they're trying to change and what they're trying to accomplish in the world, we know that when they introduce this therapy, that it's going to be much more feasible and much more available for everyone. And so that's kind of the catch-22 that we're in, the rock and the hard place that we're in. Either, if there is a lot of big pharma interest, then we will introduce this therapy to the United States, and it will be incredibly cost prohibitive for practically everybody for a very, very long time, because with stem cells, you will be able to add indications left and right forever. You can, the IV stem cell therapy that's available in Panama works for a slew of conditions. And once they get their first one, they can just extend their patent forever and make it cost prohibitive for the next 2 or 3 generations if they really wanted to. And so if this falls in the wrong hands, it could basically be a pipe dream for all of the regular people in the United States and frankly the world. I really think there needs to be federal legislation regarding how to regulate regenerative medicine, because the FDA works in the confines of laws that regulate medical devices and laws that regulate drugs. Stem cells are neither a device or a drug. They can act like both or none at the same time. And on a state level, I mean, in Texas, for example, we do have a law that allows us to use certain types of adult stem cells, but no one is really willing to take the opportunity to use that law, because we have a federal law that really negates that, and nobody really wants a federal agency knocking at their door questioning their clinical judgment or the offerings that their clinic provides. And so I really think we need federal legislation that defines a path forward for all regenerative medicine, whether it's autologous, whether it's allogeneic, and kind of really gives us a path forward for regulators to regulate and for clinicians to deliver and for manufacturers to start producing. I think that's the only way that we can quickly provide this to the masses at an affordable price and really change healthcare.